Throughout history, humanity has faced moments of desperation so extreme that the line between survival and morality becomes blurred. In situations where famine, isolation, and terror grip individuals and societies, people have made unthinkable choices just to survive. Join us as we delve into 7 harrowing true stories of cannibalism, a dark reminder of how far survival instincts can drive us when the very essence of life is at stake. Viewer discretion is advised. 1. The Donner Party, the Frozen Hell in Sierra Nevada, 1846 to 1847. In the winter of 1846, 87 members of the Donner Party, including children and women, embarked on a promising journey to California. However, they were trapped in the Sierra Nevada mountains during an unprecedentedly frigid winter. Snowstorms relentlessly poured down, piling thick layers of snow across the entire range, blocking all paths. Day after day, temperatures plunged below freezing, and an atmosphere of death enveloped everything. At first, they gritted their teeth and ate horse meat, leather, even tree bark, but the hunger never ceased. The group's leader, George Donner, haggard and hollow-eyed from sleepless nights, made a decision no one dared imagine. The first to succumb was an elderly man, Patrick Breen, a respected elder with silver hair, who now became sustenance for the others. The air was thick with the stench of death, and as they passed around slices of Patrick's flesh, silence fell over the group. Each bite, icy and tough, tasted of fear and dread. Hollow eyes and pale faces, all were steeped in an unending nightmare. The party survived that dark winter through the flesh of their own, and when they were finally rescued, they were no longer ordinary people, but haunted souls who would never forget the horror they had endured. 2. Holodomor, the famine horror in Ukraine, 1932 to 1933. In the freezing winter of 1932, millions of Ukrainians faced an unimaginable famine, forced upon them by Stalin's policies, which required farmers to surrender all their food to the state. Starvation so severe that people lost the strength to move. Children lay emaciated along the roads. In the face of such despair, rumors began circulating of families consuming the flesh of deceased relatives. One such story is of Anna Kovalenko, a mother who lost 3 children to hunger, a tale that chills everyone who hears it. When her youngest child took his final breath in the bitter night, she sat beside his lifeless body, her heart shattered, and her hunger unbearable. The rumbling of her stomach clouded her mind, and in a moment of madness, she took a knife and cut a piece of flesh from her lost child's body. Each piece touched her lips like a curse, but it was her only way to survive. Every bite was a silent scream of despair, as she became the monster she herself could not recognize. 3. The tragedy of Uruguay Flight 571, 1972. On October 13th, 1972, Flight 571 crashed into the snow-laden Andes, leaving no signs of life around them. The surviving passengers, including young athletes, were stranded on a mountaintop in freezing weather, without food or rescue in sight. In the early days, they tried to survive by melting snow for water and eating whatever was left on the plane. But when every morsel was gone, their leader, Roberto Canessa, suggested the unimaginable, eating the flesh of the deceased. At first, the very thought was horrifying, but hunger gradually eroded their sanity. When they finally bit into human flesh for the first time, the frozen, rubbery meat seemed to pierce each cell, filling them with terror. Yet it was the only way to survive. When they were finally rescued after 72 days, the survivors bore a bloody memory that would never fade. Each returned with hollow eyes, forever haunted by the ordeal they endured in the icy Andes. 4. The blood sacrifices of the Aztecs, when reverence for gods becomes a nightmare. The Aztecs believed their gods needed human blood and flesh to maintain their power. During sacrificial ceremonies, Aztec warriors captured prisoners of war and brought them to the temple for ritual. Amid the pounding of drums and cheers of the crowd, prisoners stood bound, trembling as they faced their grim fate. The priests, dressed in elaborate costumes, stepped forward, raising sharp knives, and made a deep cut into prisoners' chests, their hands drenched in blood as they offered the still-beating hearts to the gods. The bodies were then dismembered, and human flesh was roasted over fires. The smell of burnt human flesh mingled with the incense, creating an atmosphere both horrifying and sacred. To the Aztecs, this ritual was a way to protect their world from destruction. But to outsiders, it was a nightmare of blood and bones. 5. The Great Leap Forward and the Famine Horror in China, 1958 to 1962. During the Great Leap Forward, Mao Zedong's policies led millions of Chinese into a horrifying famine. Food supplies were seized entirely to meet delusional industrial and agricultural goals, leaving the people without food, livestock taken, and even trees destroyed for fuel. Villages were barren, fields bare, and hunger turned into a monster, taking over every shadowy corner of life. The story of Li Wei, a farmer in a poor rural village, is one of the horrific examples of what happened. Li had 3 children, but as hunger seeped into every household, 2 of his children wasted away from malnutrition. Only his youngest child remained, frail and skeletal, with sunken eyes and faint breath. One night, when the child's breathing stopped, Li sat by the body, overwhelmed by grief, unable to imagine how he would survive the next day. After hours of anguish, Li's eyes fixed on his deceased child's body, left with no other choice. He took the only knife they owned, his hand shaking, his lips trembling. Each cut felt as though he was carving into his own heart. By the dim flicker of an oil lamp, he struggled to stifle his sobs as he ate his child's flesh, feeding both himself and his wife. The trauma of consuming his own child's flesh etched itself deep in his mind, and each bite confronted him with his survival instinct and paternal love. When villagers discovered his act, there was silence. No one condemned him, for they too were on the edge of desperation. Hunger had turned people into ruthless beings, not only toward themselves but even toward their own families, leaving no one strong enough to judge. 6. The Korowai tribe of Papua New Guinea, which hunts and ritual cannibalism ***. Deep in the forests of Papua New Guinea, the Korowai tribe lives in isolation, with little contact with the outside world, believing that witches are the cause of illness and disaster. The Korowai continue ritual cannibalism to purge evil spirits. To them, this is not an act of barbarism, but a sacred ritual to protect their community from dark forces. The story begins with a man named Kalia, a villager accused of witchcraft after his neighbor's family fell ill. At first, suspicious glances followed him. Then whispers spread, until the village believed Kalia was the source of their suffering. One night, they held a witch hunt, carrying torches and crude weapons, with pounding footsteps and shadows dancing in the moonlight. They finally captured Kalia, binding him amid cries of anger. As the cannibalistic ritual began, the entire village gathered around a large fire, their eyes filled with excitement and fear. Kalia trembled, knowing his fate, his pleas drowned by the crowd's shouts. The warriors approached, cutting pieces of flesh from his body and roasting them over flames. As each steaming piece was passed around, their eyes grew wild, as though possessed by a demonic fervor. The sounds of chewing, the ghastly noises filled the air, leaving a chilling mark on everyone's minds. In the darkness of the Papua New Guinea forests, these cannibalistic rituals have persisted for generations. To the Korowai, it is a way to ward off evil and protect loved ones. But for any outsider, the ritual is a nightmarish vision of blood and madness, where humanity is eroded by strange and brutal beliefs. 7. The Siege of Leningrad, Survival in a Starvation Hell, 1941 to 1944. The German siege of Leningrad was one of the darkest chapters of World War II, lasting 872 days and claiming the lives of more than 1 million citizens. With supply lines cut off, The people of Leningrad fought to survive amidst unbearable hunger. In the early days, they consumed every edible thing: moldy breadcrumbs, plaster, even bandages. As time passed, however, even these were exhausted. An elderly couple living on the second floor of a quiet street was said to have reached the point where survival instincts overtook them. When her husband died of malnutrition, the wife sat beside his body for hours, her eyes blank. Finally, she picked up the kitchen knife and made the first cut into the flesh of the man she had loved for so many years. Initially, she only intended to keep the body as a final reminder of love amidst destruction. But day after day, hunger gnawed at her relentlessly until she could resist no longer. The first bite, cold and rigid, mingled with her tears as she cried, the salty taste of her own sorrow mixing with the flesh. During those dark days, German patrols roamed the city, trying in vain to stop cannibalism. But for many Leningraders, hunger did more than kill, it stripped away humanity. The stories of cannibalism became a taboo after the siege ended. Yet those who survived never forgot. The memories of such ghastly meals were deeply etched into their souls, serving as a grim reminder of how hunger could turn humans into monsters. These stories of survival expose the depths to which desperation can drive humanity. Though we may never fully understand the suffering these individuals endured, their stories remind us of the fragile line between life and morality. In the face of unimaginable circumstances, even the strongest spirit can be bent, distorted by the primal instinct to survive. Let these stories serve as haunting lessons from history, a testament to human resilience, but also a sobering reminder of the darkness that lies within us all.